Am I on? I don't know if I did it the right way. There we go. Yeah, it's good to worship with you guys this morning. We have kids' church for ages 1 to 11. Their chance to experience Jesus on their level and know his love for them. I was a junior in high school when I was called into the principal's office. I usually was, mostly well-behaved. I don't want to trip on this. Mostly well-behaved. But when you're called into the principal's office, you get a little bit nervous anyway. Like, I don't think I did anything wrong, but, maybe there was something that I did. And the principal tried to assure me, no, it's good news, it's good news. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I still have to go into your office, and that usually means bad news. But I get into his office, and my friend Laura was there as well. And I probably still looked like really nervous. I'm like, my breath is short. I'm like, what's he gonna say? And he was like, okay, well, I do have some good news. The good news is that you have qualified for a really wonderful scholarship. I'm like, oh, okay, this is good news. I could take a scholarship. I was a junior in high school, so it's just kind of right on that beginning time where you might be thinking about colleges. And so I'm like, okay, wow, where is this scholarship to? And he said, Washington State University. Now, some of you know that I did end up going to Washington State University, which kind of ruins the story. But at the time, I grew up in the little town of Colfax, Washington, 3,000 people, and Washington State University was only 15 miles away. So, and at that time in my life, I'm like, 17 years old, and I'm like, I want to fly. I want to break out of this joint. I want to live my life. I want to be an adult. I'm ready. And so going 15 miles away to a party school, which I did not identify with at all, did not sound like the thing I wanted to do. So, like, okay, that's cool, I guess, that I qualify for this scholarship, but I'm really not interested in going to WSU. But the principal encouraged me to apply anyway, even though I thought, maybe this isn't going to be the school for me. And so eventually I did apply. But I had my sights on something different. I, considered myself to be a Christian girl, and I wanted to go to a perfect college for me, which for me, that meant a private Christian college. I really wanted to go to Seattle Pacific University. And there's nothing against Seattle Pacific. I'm sure it's a wonderful school. I didn't end up going there, as many of you know, but that was the school that I really wanted to go to. And so despite having applied for this scholarship at Washington State, I had set my eyes on SPU. I started going to different, like events to learn more about the university that they put on for local high school students to get orientation. Well, it wasn't like orientation like I was going to go there, but like orientating me to the possibility of going to Seattle Pacific. And so I then, so I had my sights set on that, and then I found out that I did actually get the scholarship to Washington State. And so then I had a huge decision to make. Was I going to go to this party school that I really didn't want to, but I got this really amazing scholarship for, or was I going to go to Seattle Pacific, which I felt like, this is where I should go. So I had a huge decision to make. Our main character in our story today in 1 Kings chapter 22 is King Ahab, and he also had a very big decision to make. And so we're going to follow him. We've been in this series on the book of 1 Kings chapter 22 throughout the whole, and this is our last chapter. We have made it to the last chapter of 1 Kings. We've made it all the way through. It's following the story of Israel, and in our polarized world, we get to see Israel's journey of trying to make these kings into gods and how that doesn't really work out very well. And we see that the only true God worth following is God himself. So we're going to finish the last chapter today. Next week, Nate is going to put a cap on our series, kind of summarizing where we've been and kind of doing a concluding message. The following Sunday, we have a guest speaker, my colleague Christian. And then the next Sunday, we're going to jump into our next series. I'm not going to announce it today, but it's going to be a good one. I'm excited to share it with you, I think, next week. So we have King Ahab, and he has a big decision to make. So let's start reading here. 1 Kings chapter 22. For 3 years, Syria and Israel continued without war. But in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, so remember, Judah's in the south, the southern kingdom. So Jehoshaphat is the current king of Judah. He came down to the king of Israel. King of Israel is Ahab. And the king of Israel said to his servants, "Do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us? And we keep quiet and do not take it out of the hand of the king of Syria." So this is some land that they feel like, that's supposed to be our land. And here we are, sitting around, keeping quiet. And he said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead?" And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "I am as you are. My people are as your people, my horses as your horses." And Jehoshaphat said, and I'll just say something there. Okay, so Ahab is asking Jehoshaphat, "Will you go to war so that we can recapture this land, Ramoth Gilead?" And so Jehoshaphat is saying, "Yep, I'm with you. Everything I have is yours. Let's do this together." But then Jehoshaphat says to the king of Israel, Ahab, "Inquire first for the word of the Lord." So, this is a decent step, right? Like they want to see what God would encourage them or not encourage them to do. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, that's a lot of prophets to gather together, and said to them, "Shall I go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain?" And they said, the prophets, they said, "Go up, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king." Okay, well, this seems good news for Ahab. He's inquired of the Lord through these prophets, and the prophets say, "Yep, you're going to win this battle." But Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, said, "Is there not here another prophet of the Lord of whom we may inquire?" So he's like, yeah, your prophet said that, but is there someone else? Maybe we shouldn't just go with what these 400 prophets are saying. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "There is yet one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil." Well, let's remind ourselves that Ahab is described as the worst king ever of Israel. So it's not super surprising that there's often these prophecies by Micaiah against King Ahab, because Ahab is not helping people follow the Lord. He's putting up these Baal structures, encouraging people to worship. We've found that there's a lot of really concerning behavior that goes on, sacrifices and cutting yourself and all these things that go along with serving Baal. And so Ahab's like, "Well, I don't really want to consult Micaiah because he's always against me." And Jehoshaphat said, "Let not the king say so." So they're going to consult Micaiah. Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, "Bring quickly Micaiah, the son of Imlah." Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, made for himself horns of iron and said, "Thus says the Lord, with With these you shall push the Syrians until they are destroyed. So we have another prophecy from Zedekiah with this symbolism of the iron horns. Like it means like they're going to be successful because these horns represent strength and power, and you're just going to defeat them all. So we have another prophet saying, you're going to win, you're going to win. And all the prophets prophesied so and said, go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king. Okay, so Ahab's feeling pretty good. All the prophets are like, yep, you're going to win this battle. Can't wait. And the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably. But Micaiah said, as the Lord lives, what the Lord says to me, that I will speak. So these people are like, hey, just so you know, there's like 401 prophets saying that he's going to win. You should probably go along with that. That might be the best for your future, because if you disagree, then that's going to be a really big deal. But Micaiah is focused on, I'm going to say what the Lord wants me to say, not what the public opinion is. And when he came to the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain? And he answered him, go up and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king. So, seems like he's agreeing too. But the king said to him, how many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Ahab is not used to Micaiah agreeing with him. And so he's like, wait a minute, this seems like too good of news. So let's make sure, are you sure that you're sure that you're sure that the Lord is speaking that to you? And he said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. Uh-oh, that's not good news. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each return to his home in peace. Okay, so now Micaiah is pronouncing a not so good. So the first lead was kind of like, oh yeah, do whatever you want. I'm sure it's fine. And then here's the real prophecy of I see you scattered, meaning you don't have a leader, you are losing the battle. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? So the King Ahab is like, darn it, another evil prophecy from Micaiah. So I'm going to skip a few verses here. There's this interesting, very prophetic scene that Micaiah ends up describing. I'll let you look at it later. We're going to skip it for today. We're going to pick back up on 26. And the king of Israel said, seize Micaiah and take him back to Amon, the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, thus says the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him meager rations of bread and water until I come in peace. And Micaiah said, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. And he said, hear, all you peoples. So we see that there were major consequences that Micaiah is going to face. King Ahab now does not appreciate his prophecy because his prophecy is against what Ahab wants to do. So Ahab seems to be seeking the Lord and what the Lord wants, but as soon as there's a negative voice concerning what God might say, he's like, I don't like that prophecy. You're going to prison, and we're barely going to feed you. So Micaiah ends up in prison. And so the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. So they decide, we like our 401 prophets, what they said. We don't really like what Micaiah said. We're going to assume he's wrong, and the 401 are correct, and we're going. We're going to battle. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your robes. The king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. So we have two kings going into battle. Usually they'd wear their kingly garb. So he's like, Jehoshaphat, you should keep your kingly garb, and I'll just disguise myself and wear normal fighting clothing. Now the king of Syria had commanded the 32 captains of his chariots, fight with neither small nor great, but only with the king of Israel. So they're targeting the king of Israel. They want Ahab. And when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, oh, it's surely the king of Israel. So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out. So they've targeted what they think is the king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, but that's obviously not the king of Israel. And when the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. So they have one target only. They're not going to be fooled, so they pull back. But a certain man drew his bow at random and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. Therefore he said to the driver of his chariot, turn around and carry me out of battle, for I am wounded. So the main chariots didn't end up getting the king of Israel. This random arrow happened to hit this, plainly dressed person in the army that turned out to be King Ahab. And the battle continued that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Syrians till at evening he died. And the blood of the wound flowed into the bottom of the chariot. Details you really want to know. And about sunset, a cry went through the army, every man to his city and every man to his country. Another way of saying, we're surrendering. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. King Ahab has finished his life. The rest of the chapter, Ahab dies, as it was prophesied. Jehoshaphat reigns and dies. It kind of goes into a little bit more of his life, king of Judah. And then Ahaziah, Ahab's son, reigns in the way Ahab had, serving Baal. So we come to the end of 1 Kings. We've come to the end of King Ahab's life, the worst king of Israel ever. So as I think about what this story tells us, we've talked a lot about the oral culture of Israel. Like, what's the story? What's the story for the children and the grandchildren? Why did they write this particular thing down? We've seen throughout the book, whenever someone dies, it's like, okay, so we told you the stories we're going to tell you in the book of 1 Kings, but also you can look at this other history book about other things about their lives. So the author of 1 Kings has pulled out the main things that they want their children and their grandchildren to really know. And I think the main thing that they would want their children and their grandchildren to know is that on the surface level, it appeared that Ahab wanted to follow God, to put God in charge. Like, I want to know what the prophets say as if he wants to follow them. But it turns out that Ahab wanted God to follow him. Ahab wanted to go to battle. He wanted to join with Jehoshaphat. He wanted to win this battle. He only wanted to hear the prophets if they said what he wanted. He wanted to be the God and let God serve whatever he wanted. And the minute there was a real prophecy that countered that, he's like, oh, that can't be God, because I know the right way. He wanted to be his own God. He went into battle anyway, and he paid the ultimate price. So I think the message for the children and the grandchildren is be careful. Be careful that you are seeking God for his leadership instead of seeking God to follow your leadership? When I was at the conference I went to in Phoenix a few weeks ago, there was a seminar that was put on. There were lots of different breakout sessions, and one of the ones I went to was on secularism, like how to talk about God in the midst of secular people. And they defined what secular meant in the context they were talking about in the seminar. And they showed this slide, which I thought was so fascinating, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And it really connects with our story here. So, secularism says that self is king. And the things below are the things that serve self. So I'm in charge of my life. I want to do it my way. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I'm the God of my life. So, work is underneath that. I decide where I work. Family's under that. I decide how I'm going to do family. And in some cases, you might even decide, oh, sure, I'll try out that, or I'll try this religion or whatever, but it's all to serve the self. This is defining secularism. So everything is there to serve the self, because self is God, self is the one to follow. In contrast, Christianity says God is the king, God is in charge, and so the self falls underneath God. The self is acknowledging that God is the creator, God is the leader, and I'm going to follow him instead of me being the main God and leader of my own life. So what I decide to do for work, how I work, comes under the leadership of God. How I do my family, how that comes under the leadership of God. How I interact comes under the leadership of God. Ahab was the first category. His self was the God, and he wanted his work, his battle, to serve himself and what he wanted to do. And he consulted God, but ultimately self was in charge of what he wanted to do. And so this message for the children and the grandchildren is, don't consult God just to serve yourself. You need to consult God for God's own best. So I had a big decision to make on what I was going to do for college. And during that time, I was part of a small group Bible study with a local church in town. And I don't know if it was because I was facing big decisions in my life of where to go to college, or if the leader just decided, like, hey, this seems like a cool workbook. But the workbook was on decision making and kind of bringing your decisions before God. And early on in the workbook, it asked me, what's a big decision that you want God's leadership in? And for me, that was easy. Like, so I decided I wanted to bring this decision of where to go to college before God. And so I wrote that down, I want to bring this decision before God. And I thought, okay, well, this is pretty easy because clearly God sees me as this wonderful, good Christian girl who needs to go to a private Christian school. And so he's just going to rubber stamp that plan, no problem. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this whole decision-making workbook, but, I've got it pretty nailed. But then I had found out, as I said, that I had gotten the scholarship to Washington State. And I was like, okay, whatever, I don't know about that, but I'm still going in the direction of Seattle Pacific. So, I mean, I was definitely where I tried to get like equal or more scholarships to SBU, and I was really hoping to go there. I went to like a tour day thing during the summer, and so I went to Seattle Pacific, which is, a 5-hour drive for me from Colfax all the way over to Seattle. And and so I had this like counselor person who was leading our little group of young high school people. And there were two really big things that I was thinking about when it came to this decision. And both of those things came up that night. And I was like, it was like these two things were one, I wanted to get married, and so I was like going to SPU for my MRS degree. And the other was I wanted to be far enough away from home. And I did not bring up those questions at all, but those were like two things that I was really thinking about in my young mind that knew all about what I should do in my life. And but my counselor brought up those exact two things, and she talked about them in like a negative light. And I was like, I'm going to SVU for this. I'm going to get away from home, and I'm going to get my MRS degree. And what do you mean? Like, and she started talking about how like, yeah, a lot of people go here and they're just trying to find person. There's this like ring by spring kind of saying, and I was like, oh, that's yucky. I don't want to be a part of that. And then she was from Alaska, and she said this phrase that I still remember. She was like, you are as far away from home as you want to be. So she had traveled a long way to get to school, but she was like, like if you want some space and like time to fly or whatever, it doesn't really matter how far you're away from home. And because I had been doing this decision-making thing, and because those two things were like central to what I was thinking about, I knew, and because they were brought up like so suddenly, and like I did not bring those things up, but somehow she brought them up, I knew that God was speaking to me. I knew that God wanted me to not go to SBU and to take the scholarship to WSU. I couldn't believe it. It felt wrong. Like, I thought, going back to this slide, like, self was prime. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I was hoping that God would come along and just like serve whatever I wanted it to be. I thought I knew what God would want for my life, but really I was the king. But then God is speaking to me and he's like, I want to be the God. You were giving me this decision. You wanted my leadership on it. So now it's time to submit to me. But it turns out that Washington State was exactly where God wanted me to be. I joined Chi Alpha Campus Ministries, and I began growing in my faith in leaps and bounds. I wasn't even at a Christian college, and I was growing in my faith so much. Because of Chi Alpha's influence on my life, I became the leader and minister I am today. The chances of me speaking here in front of you today are like super slim if God would not have directed my path. God knew what I needed. In Isaiah chapter 29, it says this. This is a prophecy from the prophet Isaiah. Ah, you who hide deep from the Lord your counsel, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us? Who knows us? So hiding things from God. You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? That the thing made should say of its maker, he did not make me? Or the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding? God is the potter. We are the clay. And I don't know about you, but I don't make a very good potter. I don't make a very good potter in my life because I am not a creator. God is the creator. He made us. He made the way for us to have like the most lovely life. He deserves to be that in the God spot. And I don't know best. The clay does not know more than the potter. Jesus said something similar in John 15. He said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. So God is the vine. We are the branches. Jesus continued, already you are clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine. He's repeating himself. You are the branches. It's like we need to be told that or something. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. Jesus is the vine. We are the branches. It is only when we, as the branches, are connected to the vine of love that we can bear fruit, that we can have the joy that God created us to have. I know that when I put myself first, as the one responsible, as the one in charge, as the God over my life, that is a huge pressure and responsibility. I don't know about you, but I need a vine where I can go to when life gets hard. I'm not very good at falling back on myself. I'm not very good at being that person for myself. But having a God where you can bring your troubles to, where you can speak honestly with, that you can get leadership from that is beyond what you could even think or imagine, that is the way we are intended to live. God, our creator, the potter, he made us, not the other way around. Ahab chose to break his life from the vine and do what he wanted to do. And he suffered really negative consequences for it. Now, this is not a fear sermon of like, oh, well, if you don't follow God perfectly, then he's going to throw you into the fire and whatever, or you're going to die like Ahab. This is not the point of my sermon. Jesus comes back to it at the end when he's talking about the vine, like, stay in me. Like, the point is not that all the negative consequences. He's like, hey, if you abide in me, you're going to experience love and joy. That's the way that you're intended to live. And, God can redeem all sorts of decisions. We've all made decisions that were not in alignment with what God would have wanted us to do. But God can redeem that. There's mercy, there's grace that is beyond what we can imagine. But life is better when we abide in his love, when we, the created, look to God, our creator, for his leadership in our lives. As Nate comes back to close us, I want to encourage us to think about maybe you've got a big decision ahead of you, or just an area of your life that you're really needing God's leadership in. And I want to encourage you in this as we take some time to reflect, that to bring that decision before God, to bring that area of your life before God, and really ask for His leadership to guide you as He's the potter, He's the vine in charge, and to let go of the desire, the tendency, the temptation to make it hoping that God will just kind of rubber stamp whatever plans you have and the decisions that you already just want to make in your life. So we're going to take a little bit of time to just reflect on that. If you want to share with a neighbor what you're thinking about, the decision or the area of your life that you need God's leadership in, you can find someone to pray with. Otherwise, you can just reflect on that with God and really bring that decision for His leadership and His alone.